We want to begin this morning by giving a huge welcome to all the virtual members of Columbine United Church. You who join us from across the United States and some of you from around the world. Get this, everybody. I'm going to do a special welcome today for some people who are joining us from Oxford, England. And so it is today that we want to welcome doctors James and Maria Ray and their kids Anna Marie, Ollie, Caddy in Oxford, England. James is a consultant for the ER at Oxford University Hospital. Isn't that cool? Somebody in Oxford, England. It's great to have you with us. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You know, one of the things that I tell all of you who join us virtually, and you know what? I want to put the challenge out to you guys as well. Don't keep the message of Columbine United Church to yourself. You know, why is it that we're more than willing to tell someone about the new book that we've just read, or to tell somebody about the restaurant we just visited, or to talk to somebody about, you know, the hairdresser that we just went to because they did such a great job. But we don't talk about our church. We don't talk about our church. Because, you know, we don't want to kind of like foist our religion upon people. When maybe this church and the message that we preach is exactly what somebody is looking for. And so, you know, I tell you every single Sunday, don't just sit and listen to it on YouTube. Think about who needs to hear this. Take the message, paste it like the URL on your Facebook page and say, this is what I believe. This is the church that I go to. You need to do the same. You know, we say we change the way people think about God, the way people see God, the way people serve God. Why? Why are we changing this? It's because there is a vision of God that is exclusive. And we believe in an inclusive God, where God invites all people to the table. So it's good to have you here. Share the message. Share the message. Let's welcome these folks with a warm Columbine welcome. Our scripture passage this morning comes to us from the Hebrew Bible, the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 3, verses 1 through 14, the story of when God speaks to the young boy Samuel. Listen for God's word as it comes to us today. The boy Samuel, about 12, the boy Samuel was serving God under Eli's direction. This was at a time when the revelation of God was rarely heard or seen. One night, Eli was sound asleep. His eyesight was very bad. He could hardly see. It was well before dawn. The sanctuary lamp was still burning. Samuel was still in bed in the temple of God where the chest of God rested. Then God said, "Stop." Then God called out, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel answered, "Yes, I'm here." Then he ran to Eli, saying, "I heard you call. Here I am." Eli said, "I didn't call you. Go back to bed." And so he did. And God called again, "Samuel, Samuel." Samuel got up and went to Eli. "I heard you call. Here I am." And Eli said, "Son, I didn't call you. Go back to bed." This all happened before Samuel knew God for himself. It was before the revelation of God had been given to him personally. So God called again, "Samuel," the third time. Yet again, Samuel got up and went to Eli. "Yes, I heard you call. Here I am." That's when it dawned on Eli that God was calling the boy. So Eli directed Samuel, "Go back and lie down. If the voice calls again, say, 'Speak, God, I am your servant, ready to listen.'" Samuel returned to his bed. Then God came and stood before him exactly as before, calling out, "Samuel, Samuel." Samuel answered, "Speak, I am your servant, ready to listen." God said to Samuel, "Listen carefully. I'm getting ready to do something in Israel that is going to shake everyone up and get their attention. The time has come for me to bring down on Eli's family everything I warned him of, every last word of it. I'm letting him know that the time's up. I'm bringing judgment on his family for good. He knew what was going on, that his sons were desecrating God's name in God's place, and he did nothing to stop them. This is my sentence on the family of Eli. The evil of Eli's family can never be wiped out by sacrifice or by offering." You be 12 and hear that message. And here the passage ends, may God bless these words as I seek to apply them to our lives. When you least expect it, God whispers in your ear. And every time God whispers in your ear, the usual response is, say what? Say what? One of my favorite books, it's on one of my top 20 lists, is this book, Conversations with God, A Most Uncommon Dialogue by Neil Donald Walsch. I just love this book, Conversations with God. I love it because when it was published back in 1996, it was an international bestseller, but yet the Christian community dismissed it as heretical, New Age pap, trash, a waste of time. Don't read it. Now, anytime somebody strings together words that says heretical, New Age, pap, trash, waste of time, I got to see what the fuss is all about. I had to get me a copy of this book. And this is back in the day when Amazon was still a river in South America. And Borders was something that you didn't need a visa to cross, but Borders was a bookstore at a mall. Imagine that. A bookstore at a mall. Do you remember the days where there was bookstores at a mall? There were record stores at the mall. Remember B. Dalton's? Remember Tower Records? Baby boomers, we grew up with Tower Records. Then you could spend hours in Tower Records, hours in B. Dalton's. And so, I raced over to, I miss those good old days. I miss Tower Records and B. Dalton's and Borders. Kind of a community thing and all this. I mean, I love Amazon, don't get me wrong. I love my little e-reader. I got an encyclopedia. I got my whole library right there, but I miss going to a bookstore. Anyway, so I ran over to Villa Italia Mall. For those of you who don't know it, Villa Italia is now wiped out, along with B. Dalton's and Tower Records, and look for B. Dalton's, and sure enough, they're on the table. There on the table was stacks and stacks of these books because it was becoming an international bestseller. I'm so jealous. How do you make something an international bestseller? That's another conversation. But I grabbed the book. I was fascinated. I was inspired. This guy, Neil Donald Walsch, is having a conversation with God. And it was really interesting is that, here's a picture of Walsch. When he wrote the book, he was a homeless man. He was homeless. He had a business. He lost his business. His wife left him. His house burned down. I wonder if his wife did it. His house burned down, destroying all of his family possessions. You got to wake up a little bit. That was a joke. Some of you are looking like you belong on Mount Rushmore. Wake up. Wake up. Some of you can't even get that. What does he mean, Mount? Pay attention. Pay attention. He was in a car wreck. He was severely injured. He was living in a tent outside of Ashland, Oregon. And he was living outside of Ashland, Oregon in this tent. He felt as though God came to him and spoke to him. And he says that it's not like I was channeling God, but he said he felt as though that he was surrounded by God's presence. And as he was being surrounded by God's presence, he was inspired to write. And so he wrote what he was thinking. He wrote what he was feeling because he felt as though it was this divine conversation. And he put it in a book. And people so resonated with it that it became this international bestseller. When he least expected it, a homeless guy has a conversation with God. See, what I loved about the book is it validated my own experience. Because when I least expected it, God spoke to me. But, unlike Neil Donald Walsch, I kept it quiet. And this whole story is about my failure. My failure. And I'm hoping to share with you my failure so that you will learn from my experience. So that when you least expect it, when God speaks to you, you will act. See, that's our fall sermon series, when you least expect it. I just love this picture. I love this picture. Hi, in Florida, scuba diving, having a good time. Because, that's what happened. I don't know about you, but my life is planned out. I have this app on my phone. I have my to-do list I'm going to do. I know my goals for the day. I know my goals for the week. I know my goals for the year. I kind of have it all lined up. I have a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. I have a 50-year plan. I'm going to live to be 105. Preach until the last moment, baby. And I've learned that whole saying of human beings plan and God laughs. Because when we least expect it, God comes blowing into our lives. And usually we go, stop it! Or we go, but if we can be open to the movement of God, and have the courage to respond, I believe that's how the kingdom of God is built. Person by person, act by act. The key is to be open when you least expect it. So when you least expect it, God speaks. When I least expected it, God spoke to me. It was about 33, 34, 35, around in there. Fairly young man. Sound asleep. And I heard a very clear voice. Stephen, wake up. So I got up and I thought it was Phoebe, looked over, she's sound asleep. Went back to bed. A while later, Stephen, wake up. Got up, looked around, went back to bed. Fell back to sleep. Stephen, wake up. Okay, what's going on? So I woke up. And suddenly I felt this push to go into my living room. And so I went to my living room. And as I got into the living room, all I can say is that I felt surrounded by what could only be described as a divine presence. It was ethereal. It was something else. It was something I had never experienced before. And I had been meditating for many, many years at this point. And so I went to my meditation cushion, I sat down, and just because I heard this command that was outside of me yet inside my head, to listen, and then to watch. And then as I sat there, it was like I saw a movie. But it was not a happy movie. It was a movie of destruction. I saw buildings collapsing, buildings being blown up, fires. I saw thousands of people immediately die. And I heard God say to me, unless human beings change, this is going to happen. Unless human beings change, this is going to happen. And you need to preach this. Say what? I need to preach this? You need to preach this. You need to be preaching this. Preach it now. What do you mean now? I kind of felt like Moses before the burning bush. You got the wrong guy. You need to preach it now. Like when? This Sunday. God, this Sunday is Mother's Day. Mother's Day. I can't do this on Mother's Day. I suddenly had this image of, Mother's Day. What I love about Mother's Day, when people, when dads ask their wives, so what do you want to do for Mother's Day? Women always want to say, oh, I want the whole family to go to church. Versus Father's Day, what do you want to do for Father's Day? I don't want to go to church, I want to go for a picnic. But on Mother's Day, the place is packed with people. And this picture of moms and grandmas and corsages and brunch afterwards and, kind of a happy, happy message. And I had this image of, Happy Mother's Day. By the way, change, the world's going to be destroyed. didn't do this. I was in the middle of a doctorate program. I was one of the youngest senior pastors in the nation in a big church. I couldn't do this. I was seen as this progressive, young, going after it minister. How could I go say, we got to change or God's going to destroy us all? I mean, be me. What'd you do? I chickened out. I chickened out. I was not going to preach this. I felt sick to my stomach. I felt nauseous because I knew I was betraying God. But I could not bring myself to stand in front of you all and say, God's given me a vision. We either have to change or the world is going to be destroyed. And so I knew I was supposed to do this, but couldn't. A couple years went by. A church member who still goes to this church sets an appointment, comes in to see me. Hi, what can I do for you? Well, I'm here because God told me to come. Because I feel as though that God has given you a message and you're not preaching it, and you're supposed to be. There's something that you're not saying that you're supposed to say. I was like, how'd you know? So I told her the vision. I said, I am, then. And she said, it's okay, you should be preaching this. If God gave it to you, you should be preaching it. I said, I can't. I'm going to look like a nut. I'm going to look like a fool. I don't want to look like a fool. I can't. This between you and God. Another year goes by. Another church member sets an appointment. Comes in and says, so, God's given you a message and you haven't preached it. Was this a conspiracy? How'd you know? And so I told him the message. And he said, okay, yeah, it's a little, but you got to get over it. If God gave you the message, get over it, preach it. Because he was the one who reminded me of the story of Samuel. And it's really funny. You've been to seminary. You've been to seminary. It's in a doctorate program. You kind of study the Bible academically. Yeah, right. For some reason, I had forgotten this story. It's one of the main stories. And he said to me, you got to remember, he was 12. If God was going to be doing the speaking, he should have spoke to Eli, the spiritual leader, but he spoke to a 12-year-old boy, so he spoke to you. Big deal. He said, and then we started talking about all the different places that God spoke. God has this penchant for speaking to really different people. God speaks to kids. God speaks to Virgin Marys. God speaks to shepherds on hillsides. God speaks to old people. God speaks to someone like a homeless guy. And we started talking about, why does God choose everybody but the reverend doctors to speak to? And what I've come to believe is that reverend doctors, their egos get in the way. Because, we don't want to look like a fool. And then it's really not about you. You're just the messenger. Get out of the way. Say it, get out of the way. So you don't know what it means. So you don't know, who knows? It's not for you, get out of the way. But I don't want to look like a fool. I mean, think about this. You go down to 16th Street Mall, some there, they got a sandwich board, turn or burn. Doom! What do? I am not going to be one of those guys. But start thinking about it. I mean, think about it. If God can speak to a 12-year-old boy, if God can speak to a Virgin Mary, a 16-year-old kid, if God can speak to shepherds on the hillside, if God can speak to 93-year-old Abraham and Sarah, if God can speak to a Joseph, you know what that means? Is that God can speak to you. Imagine that. God can speak to you. I mean, if God could speak to me, and if these stories in the Bible are not heretical New Age pap, God speaking to average human beings, then God can speak to you. God can speak to you. And and as I tried to understand this over the years of my career, people have asked me, well, what does God's voice sound like? I mean, because I hear a lot of stuff. You tell me to meditate. Every time I meditate and close my eyes, all I hear is, wah! How do I figure out what is God's voice? And I love this book, Neil Donald Walsh. And I understand, you know what people's problem with the book is? Is that we think God spoke. God spoke in the Bible. Well, the UCC church says God is still speaking. And we have to understand that, yes, God spoke in the Bible, but God wasn't finished. And God is still speaking. Well, then how do we figure out what is God's voice? Well, when Neil Donald Walsh asked God this question, God, this is what he got back. My voice is always your highest thought, your clearest word, your grandest feeling. Anything else is from a different source. And I remember when I read that, I went, oh. I wrote it down. Put it where I could always see it. Highest thought, clearest word, grandest feeling. And then I started thinking about thought, word, feeling. Notice that it's not big booming voice from the clouds. No, it's thoughts, words, feelings. And then later in the book, God says, I will speak through your experiences of life. I will speak through your experiences of life. And I remember when I read that, I was like, that's so true. Because haven't you ever been to a movie and you go, wow, that movie really spoke to me? Or you're reading a book, and it's you can't help but cry as you're reading the book because the book is speaking to you. Or you hear a sermon, and you think, wow, that was for me. The guy's been following me around the past week. Could it be that God is speaking to you? See, and the insight here is that God speaks in many, many different ways to many different people. I mean, think about it. The population is about, let's call it 7 billion. It's 6 point something or other, but round it up, 7, because we're going up, 7. So God is speaking in at least 7 billion ways. And let's say that God speaks at least 3 different ways to every human being. That's 21 billion ways that God's speaking. It means God can do anything, right? 21 billion ways that God is speaking. Through thoughts, words, feelings, experiences. Imagine God speaking to you. Not to me, to you. And what's happened to you, it even happened at the 8 o'clock service, you might be feeling this. God going, right now. You know, and the key thing, think about it. If God was to speak to you right now in this service or afterwards later, what would God say to you? You. Because God knows how to nail it about you and your life. So what would God say to you? You know, would God say, look, it's time to get a life. Stop the whining. Get a life. Would God say to you, look, it's time. Move out of your parents' house. You're 45. Get a job. Get a new job. Get a new job. Would God say to you, look, you really need to take a rest? It's time to take a break. Would God say, look, it's time for a new relationship? Willow Sammy was really funny. She was at the 8 o'clock service. She said, that was a shout out to me. Willow is playing Peter Pan in one of the community theaters. Mitch, you're going to give us the contact information because I want us all to go see Willow play Peter Pan. But God is maybe saying to you, you need a new relationship. Maybe God is saying, look, it's time for you to take a risk. It's time for you to get out there and take a risk. Maybe God is saying to yourself, look, forgive yourself. It's time. That was in the past. Let it go. Don't be shaped by your past, shaped by your imagination. That can only happen if you forgive yourself. Maybe God is trying to tell you, hang on! Now, when I put together these keynotes, I always try to find just one picture for an idea. But when I was looking for this, I stumbled upon this picture, and then I said, oh, that's so funny. So I typed, I wonder if there's more mutton busting. Y'all know what mutton busting, right? You go to the rodeo, and we put kids in helmets. Oxford, England, we do this thing here in the Rocky Mountain West. We take little kids, we put a bicycle helmet, and we put them on a sheep, and we prod the sheep. You do that in England? Didn't think so. Hope not. But I saw so many funny pictures about mutton busting. I'm just going to put them all in because I think they're so funny. So is God telling you, hang on? Or is God telling you, you're going the wrong way? Or is God telling you, it's okay to fail? Or is God telling you, focus? Or is God telling you, don't be afraid, I will grab you? Or is God telling you, hang in there? Or is God telling you, life is a ride? Or is God telling you, woo, dog, you did it, celebrate? Putting together these keynotes, you wouldn't believe the funny pictures that are out there. I love that picture of the little boy. Woo, dog! You can just hear him. We did it! Whatever. Love that. God telling you, celebrate! Go see some leaves that are changing! Celebrate! Sorry, God, I got to go to work. Celebrate! Oh, there's no Bronco game this afternoon. Celebrate! Go see some leaves. God is speaking to you. And the crazy thing is that you can hear God, but you've got to stop dismissing your life. You have to take seriously the notion that your life is sacred. That your life is sacred. So sacred that God wants you to be so successful in life. That God is going to bombard you with ideas. Bombard you with people. And you've got to open up to them. Instead of waking up and saying, God, that was a crazy dream. Instead of saying, wow, that was a really weird book. And that was the strangest sermon I've ever heard. And instead, take seriously the idea that the Almighty Creator who flung the planets loves you. Loves you. And is going to do everything in the divine power to empower you to be successful. But you have to decide, if you're going to listen or chicken out. Because I got to tell you, once you've got it figured out, boom, this is God's voice. At the 8 o'clock service, people came and said, that's really weird, because I heard it, and I too chickened out because I didn't want to look like a fool. Because you either do it or you don't. You either do it or you don't. See, for me, I finally decided, okay, I'm tired of chickening out. I am not going to chicken out anymore. And I sucked up the courage. I wrote the sermon. Rally Day, September 9th, 2001. That was the big day. Rally Day. This big apocalyptic vision. Wrote the sermon, got up, had a full-on panic attack. Started vomiting everywhere. Those of you who have had panic attacks, it's like an elephant sits on your brain, on your whole being. Just couldn't stop vomiting. So I called the associate pastor, Jim Simons, at the time, who was here a few weeks ago. I said, Jim, I can't do this. I can't. He didn't know what I was going to preach on. I said, I can't come to church. I can't. He said, don't worry, I got it. I was like, and I said, okay, I can do it next Sunday. I'll do it next Sunday. Next Sunday. Well, that was September 9th, 2001. Monday was September 10th, 2001. On Tuesday, September 11th, I saw my vision unfold before my eyes. And I was like, in the middle of the morning, the spiritual director that I had been seeing showed up. He said, because I told him the vision. Now let's be clear. I'm not so crazy as to think that if I, 10 years ago shared the vision that I would have stopped 9/11. That's crazy thinking. That's not what it was about. But what I walked away from, the whole thing, thinking is that I wonder what would have happened if I had shared it. And to this dying day, I wonder what would have happened. When I die, I wonder what would have changed. From that moment, I said, never again will I not listen. In fact, one of the reasons why I think God put Mitch in my life, because Mitch has no problem saying, oh, God spoke to me, my angel spoke to me, and I went, huh? And Mitch has been the one who's encouraged me, speak. And that's why, when you hear me say, okay, I came to church on my way to church today, I heard God say to me, and so I got to change my sermon. That's not just because I'm being, flaky. It's because that's what I feel. I was at this engagement yesterday afternoon, and I sat beside a young somebody, a 30-year-old woman who is a dental assistant, and she wants to be a dentist. She'd love to be a dentist. And I says, why not? Well, I'm 31, I'm a single mom, got a 4-year-old son, I have to go to school for 8 years. So, time's clicking by. She goes, well, so many excuses. I just want to know. I said, I'm a minister. Let me tell you what God wants you to do with your life. And I said, you know what? I'm writing a sermon. I'm preaching a sermon tomorrow. And you know what my last line is? Do you really want to die wondering what would have happened if you had gone to college, gone to dental school? Do you really want to wonder what would have happened if you had listened to God? Do you really want to wonder? Because you know what? I'm wondering, and I hate it. Don't be afraid to look like a fool when God is speaking to you. It might not just be to change your life, but to change the world.
Dear God, as we come to prayer, silence in us any voice but your own. And then we can listen. And in our listening, so many things may need to happen. So beautiful to be in this community of faith, to watch people talk and care for each other and sit together and hold hands, laugh, cry. That's why it's called a church. But dear God, in the church, there come those moments in which you are going to address. You're going to give a thought of address, a word of address, a feeling of address to each and every one of us. Yes, thank you for the community. But in each individual life, we need to listen. And each individual name will be given. Maybe it is Joe, or Steve, or Mary, or John. We need to listen. And what Steve is borne witness to, oh God, is that even if it comes as puzzle and challenge, it's coming. And yet if it comes as the still small voice that says, now it's time to come on up to some higher ground. I'm glad Steve said you have 21 billion ways to speak to us. That is so good, so fruitful, so hopeful. And then give us what we need in the deepest places of our hearts and our lives to get up after we've listened and to do something. At its very limiting edges, three wonderful things are going to happen. Our love for you will deepen, for we've been taught to love you with all our mind, heart, and soul. As we listen, we'll become more sensitive to those around us. And as we listen, we'll know more about ourselves and what to do with our lives. So grant us the courage and the strength and the kindness and the love that we will always need, so that we'll do and be what you would have us do and be. And dear God, just a little bit, keep us from wondering in such a way that maybe we listened and didn't do it. Grant us divine permission to live our lives fully, completely, and wonderfully. And so it is. And then one day on the dusty roads of Galilee, they came to him and asked him a question. And it was a question in their hearts that you gave them to ask. And here's what they asked. Lord, would you teach us to pray? And he said, yes. Will you join me? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. And give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever.